The works of Charles M. Russell. Charles Marion Russell was many things: consummate Westerner, historian, advocate of the Northern Plain Indians, cowboy, rider, outdoorsman, philosopher, environmentalist, conservationist, and not least, artist. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, Russell dreamed of becoming a cowboy and living the exciting life of men on the range. In 1880, Russell came to the Judith Basin of central Montana a few days after his 16th birthday to try his hand as a cowpuncher. After a brief, unsuccessful stint on a sheep ranch, Jake Hoover, a hunter and trader, took Russell under his wing and taught him the ways of the wilderness. Russell spent 2 years as Hoover's apprentice, working with and living in Hoover's cabin on the South Fork of the Judith River. In 1982, Russell finally secured a job as a night herder with several cattle outfits operating in the Judith Basin. This was the perfect job for the young artist because it gave him the opportunity during the day to observe, sketch, and document activities and excitement of the cow camps. He worked as a cowboy wrangler for 11 years before retiring in 1883 to become a full-time artist. Russell greatly admired the Northern Plains Indians, closely observing their ways during the summer of 1888, when he lived near the camps of Blackfeet, Piegan, and the Blood Indians in Alberta, Canada. This experience affected him for the rest of his life, and it is reflected in the many detailed works he created of the Plains Indian life. In 1896, Russell married Nancy Cooper, and she quickly assumed the role of business manager and promoter of her husband's career. In 1900, the couple built a modest frame house in Great Falls. 3 years later, a log studio that Russell filled with his collection of Indian clothing, utilitarian objects, weapons, cowboy gear, horse jewelry, and other Western props useful in depicting scenes of the Old West. Russell completed the majority of his significant works in the studio. In 1916, Charlie and Nancy adopted their son, Jack. Russell died of congestive heart failure in the Great Falls home on October 24, 1926. By the early 1900s, Charles Russell had become an internationally known artist, yet he opted to spend his entire life after the age of 16 in Montana. His love of Montana and the life he observed and participated in there shaped his art and his personal philosophy for 46 years. Russell created approximately 4,000 works of art during his lifetime. His art is first and foremost that of a storyteller, and was informed by his remarkable ability to capture in paint, bronze, ink, and wax the personalities and events of his time and place. He was the first Western artist to live the majority of his life in the West. For this reason, Charles knew his subject matter intimately, setting the standard for many Western artists to follow. The first picture we'll be going over by Charles Russell is called Cowboy on a Bay Horse, painted in 1895. The medium is watercolor on paper. The dozen of years Charles spent as a night herder for Montana cattle outfits only sealed his identity as a cowboy artist and an inexhaustible supply of colorful subjects. Cowboy on a Bay Horse is one of just over 24 known equestrian portraits the artist produced of individual range riders during his productive career. Most of these watercolor, pen, and ink works, including this one, date to the 1890s. Although the identity of the confident cowpuncher in this image is unknown, Russell often portrayed his pals with whom he'd ridden in the range. You can also notice the color in the background of his paintings always portray exactly what he saw on the plains, always staying true to the reality of the scenery. If you notice, the horse's right hip bears a pinwheel-shaped brand that appears in one or more than Russell's painting. This design had been used on Montana cattle as early as 1874. In 1883, the year after Russell worked his first roundup, ranchers James Sutherland and W.S. Springs of Meagher County became the first in the territory to register a horse brand of that design and anatomical location. In the years that followed, ranchers in Beaverhead, Fergus, Yellowstone, Flathead, Jefferson, and Lewis and Clark counties also applied the brand to various places on both horses and cattle. The next picture we'll be looking at by Charles Russell is called The Horse Thieves, and it's from the series Scouting Party. Painted in 1901 on a canvas with oil paints, and it is from a private collection. So this gorgeous oil from the 1901, Russell identifies the famous fighter, White Quiver, the legendary Blackfeet warrior, remembered as his greatest horse raider of his time. By his wolf-skin bonnet with a single eagle feather. White Quiver is leading a band of warriors down a craggy mountain trail. He is suddenly stopped at the descent because, by the tilt of his head, it is clear that he has either spotted or heard something on the trail ahead. Spectators may only guess at the action about to come. Russell leaves the viewer's imagination all the conclusions about how the scene unfolds. Sarah Burt, a curator for the C.M. Russell Museum, quotes, "Employing one of his favorite storytelling devices, Russell presents an unresolved moment in the picture narrative, leaving it up to the viewer to decide what will happen next." Beginning in the 1890s, Charles Russell developed two approaches to painting intertribal conflicts. One involved depictions of running fights with riders clashing at full gallop. His other tactic was to show a dismounted warrior making a desperate stand against a charging enemy. In this 1897 watercolor, known as The Battle Between the Blackfeet and the Piegans, is a fine example of Russell's depiction of a running fight. It is an accomplished work in how it captures a sense of motion and action in the watercolor medium. The title is suspect because the Blackfeet and the Piegans are both members of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and thus are not known to have engaged in a pitched battle. Montana's legendary cowboy artist heard stories of Blackfoot Confederacy firsthand while he idled away the summer of 1888 in Alberta, Canada. Too late for the spring roundup, too early for the fall roundup, Russell did just fine loafing with a friend on a ranch near High River, fishing and visiting and enjoying himself. But it wasn't really an idle summer. The ranch was located between the Blackfoot Reserve to the north and the Piegan and Blood Reserve to the south, and the visiting had a purpose. The artist spent hours listening to the old warriors of the three Blackfoot tribes recount their youthful exploits. They told daring deeds and honors won back when the land still belonged to God. And the Blackfeet, Soy, and Crow, Russell's imagination was set ablaze by what he heard. You may also take into account that all of Russell's paintings are signed under the lower left corner, C.M. Russell with the bison skull trademark. Russell's work comprised a wide variety of topics, including major historical events and everyday life in the West. His work was noted for the frequency in which he portrayed well-known events from the point of view of Native American people instead of non-Native viewpoint. He was noted for a keen eye on the social undercurrents of society and the meticulous authenticity with which he portrayed the clothing and equipment of both cowboys and Native people.